The going out of business banner flapped in the evening wind like a death shroud. 60 years of memories, 60 years of community. Reduced to red letters on cheap vinyl, Sarah Mitchell stood in the parking lot of Mitchell's General Store, keys trembling in her hand. The sun was setting behind the building her grandfather had built in 1964, casting long shadows that seemed to cling to the weathered brick like desperate fingers. She didn't want to go inside. Not tonight. Not for the final walkthrough before tomorrow's demolition. But the lawyer had been clear. She needed to sign off on the emptiness. Confirm that everything of value had been removed before the wrecking crew arrived at dawn. Corporate efficiency, they called it. Clearview Development had purchased the entire block. They weren't interested in sentiment or history. Progress waited for no one. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from her husband, David. You okay? Want me to come with you? She typed back, No. I need to do this alone. See you at home? It was a lie. She didn't need to be alone. She was terrified of being alone. But some goodbyes required solitude, and this was one of them. The store had been her entire childhood. Summer days spent organizing shelves while her grandfather told stories about the town's history. After school hours, learning to work the ancient cash register that dinged like a bell. Her first kiss with Tommy Chin behind the storage room when she was 16. Her grandfather's funeral reception held right here, surrounded by the community he'd served for decades. Now it was just an empty shell waiting to be crushed into. Rebel Sarah unlocked the front door at the same door her grandfather had painted. Forest green, every spring Anne stepped. Inside, the smell hit her immediately. Dust, old wood, and something else. Something she couldn't quite identify. Decay, maybe? Or memory made manifest. The interior was gutted. Bare shelves lined the walls like exposed ribs. The wooden floorboards, worn smooth by thousands of footsteps, creaked under her weight. Even the ancient cash register was gone, sold to a collector for more money than it had probably rung up in its entire working life. But the space wasn't empty. Not really. Sarah could feel it, a presence, thick and watchful. The same feeling you get when someone's staring at you from across a room, except there was no one there. It's just my imagination, she whispered to herself. Grief makes you feel things that aren't real. She pulled out her phone and opened the checklist from the lawyer. Verify premises are cleared of all merchandise, fixtures, and personal effects. Simple enough. Sarah walked through the aisles, or where the aisles used to be. Her footsteps echoed too loudly in the empty space, as if the building itself was amplifying every sound. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered intermittently, even though the power was supposed to be shut off. That was odd. She made her way to the back office, her grandfather's sanctuary. The desk was gone, the filing cabinets removed. Even the old leather chair he'd sat in for 40 years had been taken to the charity shop. But the walls still bore the marks of what had been lighter rectangles where photos had hung. Nail holes where his business licenses had been displayed. A coffee ring on the windowsill that no amount of cleaning had ever removed. Sarah traced the coffee ring with her finger. And suddenly she was 10 years old again, watching her grandfather work through his ledgers with meticulous care, explaining to her that honest business meant treating every customer like family, even the difficult ones. Young Sarah had asked. Especially the difficult ones, he'd replied with a smile. A crash from the front of the store shattered the memory. Sarah spun around, heart hammering. Hello? Is someone there? Silence. She crept toward the main floor, her breath coming in short gasps. The store was supposed to be empty. The building was supposed to be secured. But that crash had been real, the unmistakable sound of something heavy falling as she emerged from the office. Sarah froze. One of the empty shelving units had fallen over, lying across the floor like a felled tree. But that was impossible. Those units were bolted to the wall for safety. She'd watched them being secured herself when she was a teenager. After a small earthquake had made her grandfather paranoid about customer safety. Old bolts, Sarah said aloud, trying to convince herself. Rust. Natural deterioration. But even as she said it, she didn't believe it. She approached the fallen shelf carefully. That's when she saw it. The bolts weren't rusted or broken. They were unscrewed, lying in a neat pile beside the wall mounts. as if someone had deliberately removed them. Sarah's phone slipped from her trembling fingers, clattering on the wooden floor. The sound seemed to trigger something because suddenly every light in the store blazed to life, not flickering, but burning with an intensity that made her squint. And in that harsh light, she saw them. Shadows, but not normal shadows. These moved independently of any light source, pooling in corners and sliding across walls like living oil slicks. They congregated near the front counter, where her grandfather had stood for decades, ringing up purchases and dispensing advice in equal measure. "This isn't real," Sarah whispered. "This is grief. Stress. My mind playing tricks." But her rational explanations crumbled when one of the shadows detached from the wall and took form. It was a man, or the impression of a man. Tall, thin, with features that seemed to shift and blur like smoke. He wore what might have been a business suit, though the details kept changing. And his eyes, God, his eyes were holes of absolute darkness that seemed to swallow light. "Sarah Mitchell," the thing said, and its voice was like paper tearing. "You're here for the final goodbye." Sarah's back hit the wall. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The shadow man glided closer, not walking but flowing across the floor. 60 years. 60 years this place stood. 60 years of community, of connection, of meaning. His voice grew sharper, more bitter. "And you sold it. Signed it away for money." I didn't have a choice," Sarah managed to gasp. The debts, the competition from big box stores, the online shopping. We were losing money for years. Grandpa would have understood, would he? The shadow man's roar shook the building. Dust rained from the ceiling. "Your grandfather poured his soul into this place. Every board, every nail, every transaction carried a piece of him. And you think he'd understand you throwing it away? It's not like that." Sarah was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "I tried everything. I tried to keep it going. But I have a family, obligations, and so the store dies." The shadow man spread his arms, and more shadows began to emerge from the walls. Dozens of them, taking various half-formed shapes. But it doesn't want to die. This building has been loved for 6 decades. Fed by human connection, sustained by community. That kind of energy doesn't just vanish because you sign papers. Sarah's terror was giving way to something else, understanding. These weren't ghosts, not exactly. They were something more abstract and more terrifying, the psychic residue of a place that had meant something. Echoes of all the lives that had intersected here, the store itself refusing to let go. "What do you want?" Sarah asked, forcing her voice to steady. The shadow man tilted his head. "Want? We want to exist. We want to matter. We want the 60 years of life that pulse through these walls to mean something more than rubble in a parking lot. But the sale is final. The demolition is scheduled for tomorrow morning. Then we have tonight." The shadow man smiled, and it was the most horrible expression Sarah had ever seen. "Tonight, we remind you what you're destroying. Tonight, you experience every memory, every moment, every piece of love and pain and life that happened here, and then, Sarah Mitchell, you'll have to live with what you've done." The shadows surged forward like a wave. Sarah turned to run, but her legs wouldn't move. The shadows were wrapping around her ankles, cold as ice and solid as iron. They pulled her down to the wooden floor, and as she fell, the world began to dissolve. The store rebuilt itself around her. Sarah was standing behind the counter, but she wasn't herself. She was wearing clothes from the 1960s, and when she looked down at her hands, they were her grandfather's hands, strong, calloused from work. She was him. Somehow, impossibly, she was experiencing his memory. The bell over the door chimed, and a young mother entered with 2 small children. Sarah's grandfather knew her name. Margaret Howell, new to town, husband deployed overseas, struggling to make ends meet. "Good morning, Margaret," Sarah heard herself say in her grandfather's voice. "How are the little ones?" "Growing like weeds," Margaret replied, but her smile was strained. She bought bread, milk, and eggs necessities, counting coins with the careful precision of someone for whom every penny mattered. When she reached the total, she was 23 cents short. Sarah felt her grandfather's instant decision. He covered the difference from his own pocket, waving away Margaret's protests. "Consider it a welcome to the neighborhood discount," he said warmly. "I run them special for folks I like." Margaret's eyes welled with tears of gratitude. The scene shifted. Now Sarah was experiencing a different memory. Her grandfather staying open late on a winter night because old Mr. Chen had called, desperate for medicine for his sick wife. The pharmacy was closed, but grandfather had stocked some basic remedies. He'd delivered them personally, trudging through 6 inches of snow, refusing payment. Another shift. Her grandfather, organizing a community food drive after the mill closed, putting the store at the center of the relief effort. Dozens of families kept from hunger, shift her grandfather mediating a dispute between neighbors. His store serving as neutral ground, where conflicts could be resolved with dignity, shift after shift after shift. 60 years of small kindnesses, of community building, of being the heart of a neighborhood. Each memory struck Sarah like a physical blow, and she understood this wasn't just a building. It was a place in the truest sense a locus of human connection, an anchor point for an entire community's shared life, and she had sold it to be torn down for a parking lot. The memories released her, and Sarah collapsed back into her own body, gasping. The shadow man stood over her. "You understand," he said quietly. "Now you feel what we feel. The weight of all those moments, all that meaning, about to be erased." Sarah struggled to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't know," she sobbed. "I didn't understand. I thought it was just a building." "Nothing is just a building," the shadow man interrupted. "Not when it's been loved. Not when it's been needed. But what can I do?" Sarah's voice broke with desperation. "The sale is final. The contracts are signed. I can't stop this, can't you?" The shadow man leaned closer. "Or won't you?" "There's always a choice, Sarah Mitchell. There's always a way to fight. The question is whether you have the courage your grandfather had. Whether you'll risk something precious to preserve something meaningful." Before Sarah could respond, the front door burst open. A man stood silhouetted in the doorway, heavy-set, expensive suit, and an expression of pure malice. Richard Crane, CEO of Clearview Development, the man who'd bought the property, but his eyes were wrong. Completely black, just like the shadow man's. "Well," Crane said, and his voice had that same paper-tearing quality. "Isn't this touching?" The granddaughter having second thoughts. The shadow man whirled to face Crane, and Sarah felt the temperature in the store plummet. You're not supposed to be here." Crane, or whatever was wearing Crane like a suit, smiled. "Neither are you. This building is mine now. Its energy, its memories, its soul, all mine. I've been feeding on places like this for decades." He inhaled deeply, as if savoring a fine wine. "Old businesses filled with decades of human emotion. Delicious." Sarah's terror crystallized into understanding. The shadow man wasn't the enemy. He was the store's defense. Its immune system trying to fight off an infection. And the infection was standing in the doorway. "You're destroying these places deliberately," Sarah said, her voice shaking but clear. "Not for development. For food." Crane laughed. "Smart girl. Yes, I consume them. The more meaning a place has, the more nourishing it is when I tear it down. And this little store?" He gestured around. 60 years of community and love. It's a feast. Tomorrow morning, when the wrecking ball hits, I'll drink in every ounce of accumulated life force. It'll sustain me for months." The shadow man surged toward Crane, but the creature in the CEO's body simply raised a hand. Dark energy crackled between them, and the shadow man was thrown backward, dissipating partially on impact. "You're persistent," Crane said, "but you're just an echo. I'm real. And I'm hungry." Sarah watched the shadow man struggling to reform, and something inside her snapped. This parasite had been feeding on her grief, her guilt, her doubt. It had manipulated her into selling. Probably orchestrated the store's financial decline. Through 100 subtle means her grandfather had spent 60 years building. Community. She'd spent 3 months, letting it be destroyed no more. Sarah stood up, and her voice was steady for the first time since entering the store. Get out. Crane turned to her, amusement in his black eyes. Excuse me? I said get out. This is still my property until dawn. You're trespassing. Bold words from someone who signed away their inheritance. Crane took a step forward. You can't stop this little girl. The contracts are binding to Richard Crane, Sarah interrupted, pulling her phone from her pocket with shaking hands. But you're not Richard Crane, are you? You're something else wearing his face. She'd managed to start recording video. The camera clearly showed Crane's black eyes, the unnatural way shadows clung to him, the way the temperature dropped when he moved. What are you going to do? Crane laughed. Show people a video. They'll think it's CGI. Fake. No one will believe you. Maybe not everyone, Sarah agreed. But someone will. And that's all I need. One person to investigate. One person to ask questions. One person to delay the demolition, even by a day. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Crane's face. Because that's what you need, isn't it? Sarah continued, her confidence growing. The demolition has to happen tomorrow. At dawn. When the meaning is strongest, when the memories are most concentrated, that's when you can feed. But if it's delayed, if there's an investigation, if your company gets scrutinized, she let the implication hang in the air. Crane's human mask slipped, revealing something older and more terrible beneath. You're bluffing. You won't sacrifice your financial security for a dead building. It's not dead, Sarah said firmly. That's what you don't understand. That's what I didn't understand. It's alive. Not the bricks and wood, the meaning. The connections. The community it represents. She looked at the Shadow Man, now partially reformed. And meaning doesn't die just because you tear down walls. The Shadow Man flickered, growing slightly more solid. I'll fight you, Sarah continued. I'll fight the sale. I'll tie you up in courts for years if I have to. And I'll tell this story with evidence to everyone who'll listen. Maybe they'll believe me, maybe they won't. But the doubt will be there. The questions. The delay. Your family will suffer, Crane hissed. You'll go bankrupt. Your husband will leave you, maybe, Sarah said. Or maybe I'll find another way. Maybe the community will rally. Maybe we'll crowdfund. Maybe we'll find investors who actually care about preservation. She smiled, and it was her grandfather's smile. Because that's what communities do. They come together. They fight for what matters. That's what this place taught people for 60 years. The building itself seemed to respond to her words. The lights grew brighter. The shadows receded from corners. The cold lessened, and the Shadow Man solidified fully, no longer flickering or translucent. You've made your choice, he said to Sarah, and his voice was different, now warmer, more human, more like her grandfather's. Crane roared in frustration, his form beginning to destabilize. This isn't over. I own this property. I will tear it down, maybe, the Shadow Man said, stepping between Crane and Sarah. But not tonight, and not without a fight. You fed on apathy and isolation. But you forgot. Places like this build immunity. Every act of kindness, every moment of connection, every choice to preserve rather than destroy, they're all antibodies. And Sarah just activated them all. The other shadows began to coalesce, forming distinct shapes. Sarah recognized some of them. Her grandfather, young and strong. Margaret Howell, with her children. Mr. Chen. Dozens of others. All the lives that had been touched by this place. They surrounded Crane. You can't touch me, Crane snarled. I'm in the physical world. You're just memories. Memories with teeth, Sarah's grandfather said, and he was smiling. You wanted to consume 60 years of accumulated meaning? Well, we're giving it to you, all at once. Let's see if you can digest it. The spirit surged forward. Crane screamed a sound of pure terror that shattered every window in the store. His borrowed body convulsed, dark energy radiating outward in waves. For a moment, Sarah thought he might actually explode. Then, with a sound like reality tearing, he simply vanished. Not destroyed, but expelled. Thrown out of the store like a virus, defeated by an immune system. The building shuddered once, then went still. Sarah stood in the broken glass and settling dust, her heart still racing. The spirits remained, but they were calmer now, their forms less aggressive and more peaceful. Her grandfather's shade approached her. Up close, she could see him clearly, exactly as he'd looked in his prime. The kind eyes and strong hands weathered by honest work. "You did good, sweetheart," he said, and his voice made her want to cry. "You understood when it mattered." "I almost destroyed everything you built," Sarah whispered. "But you didn't." He smiled. "You made the hard choice. The brave choice. That's all anyone can do." "But Grandpa, I don't know how to fix this. The sale might be stoppable if I can prove fraud or duress, but even then, the store was failing. Nothing's changed about that. We still can't compete with online shopping and big box stores. How do I save something that's already dying?" The shade of her grandfather looked around at the gathered spirits, and something passed between them, a silent communication that Sarah could feel but not hear. "You're thinking about this wrong," he said finally. "You're thinking about saving the store as it was. But things change, Sarah. Businesses evolve. The question isn't how to preserve a snapshot of 1964. The question is how to preserve the purpose, the connection, the community." Before Sarah could ask what he meant, the spirit of Margaret Howell stepped forward. "When I was struggling, your grandfather didn't just sell me groceries at a discount. He made me feel seen, like I mattered to someone. That's what we need now. The exact same building doing the exact same thing, but the same spirit of caring. Places like this don't have to die." Another spirit, a young man Sarah vaguely recognized from old photos. "They just have to adapt. Become what the community needs now, not what it needed 60 years ago." Sarah's mind was racing. An idea was forming, fragile and uncertain, but growing stronger. What if? What if we didn't reopen as a general store? Her grandfather tilted his head, curious. "Go on." "What if we made it a community center? A place for local artists to sell their work, for small businesses to have office space, for people to gather and connect. We could keep the building, preserve the history, but give it a new purpose, one that actually fills a need in today's world." The spirits murmured among themselves, and Sarah could feel their interest, their approval. "The town's been gentrifying," Sarah continued, her excitement growing. "Artists are being priced out. Small businesses can't afford downtown rents. Young families need community spaces. What if Mitchell's becomes that space? Not a store selling products people can get cheaper online, but a hub for local connection. Local art, local business, local community. And how do you fund this miracle?" Her grandfather's voice was gentle, not dismissive, but genuinely curious. "Grants. There are preservation grants, arts funding, community development money. I've been so focused on trying to save the store as a business that I never thought about saving it as a space." Sarah pulled out her phone, already searching. "There's a historic preservation society, a state arts council, federal community development program that'll take months," her grandfather said. "Maybe years. The demolition is scheduled for tomorrow morning." Sarah's excitement deflated slightly. He was right. Even if her idea was brilliant, she didn't have time to implement it before Crane's company sent in the wrecking crews. Unless... "I need to make a call," Sarah said. She dialed David's number. He answered on the first ring, clearly worried. "Sarah, are you okay? You've been in there for over an hour." "I need your help," Sarah interrupted. "And I need you to trust me, even though what I'm about to say sounds insane." There was a pause. "Okay, I'm listening." "The sale to Clearview Development was based on fraud. The CEO isn't who he claims to be, and I have evidence. I need you to file an emergency injunction first thing tomorrow morning to halt the demolition until there can be a full investigation." "Sarah, I know you're a tax attorney, not a litigator, but you know people who are? And I know this sounds crazy, but if you come here right now, I can show you evidence that will convince you. Please, David, I need you to believe in me." Another pause, longer this time. "Then, I'll be there in 10 minutes. Sarah felt tears welling up. "Thank you. But Sarah, Whatever you're involved in, we're in it together. Okay? No more doing things alone, okay, she whispered. I promise. She hung up and turned back to the spirits. I have a plan. It's risky and it might not work. But it'll work, her grandfather said firmly. Because you're fighting for the right reasons. Because you understand now what this place really means. That kind of conviction? It moves mountains. Or at least delays wrecking balls. Sarah laughed, slightly hysterical. I'm taking legal advice from a ghost. I've completely lost my mind. Or found it, her grandfather countered. Now, you've got work to do. David will help with the legal side. But you need to rally the community. You need people to show up tomorrow morning and stand between this building and those bulldozers. You need to make noise. At 5 in the morning, a building this important deserves people willing to wake up early to save it. Sarah nodded, already composing a social media post in her head. She might not have much online presence, but the town's community Facebook group was active. And if she could get even a dozen people to show up, her grandfather's form was beginning to fade, along with the other spirits. The immediate danger had passed, and they had expended enormous energy fighting off Crane's creature. Wait, Sarah said. Don't go. I have so many questions. We're not going far, her grandfather assured her. We're this building, Sarah. As long as it stands, we're here. And now that you understand its purpose, now that you're fighting for it, we're stronger than we've been in years. Will I see you again? Probably not like this. This much manifestation takes crisis-level energy, but you'll feel us. In the wood, in the walls, in the memories. We're always here. He smiled one last time. Make me proud, sweetheart. The spirits faded like mist in morning sun, and Sarah was alone in the empty. Damaged store? No, not alone. She could feel them now, a warm presence suffusing the building. Not ghosts, exactly, but not gone either. Just present. The way a beloved home feels lived in even when empty. David's car pulled up outside. Headlights cutting through the broken windows, Sarah took a deep breath. This was going to be a long night, but she'd faced down a supernatural parasite and an army of protective spirits. By comparison, bureaucracy and legal maneuvering seemed almost manageable. Almost. 5:47 a.m. the next morning. Sun was just beginning to pink the horizon when the Clearview development trucks rumbled up to Mitchell's general store. 3 of them, a crane with a wrecking ball, 2 haulers for debris, and a supervisor's pickup. What they found made the foreman stop, his convoy a block away. Nearly 200 people stood in front of the building, linking arms in a human chain. Young families, elderly residents, local business owners, artists, students from the community college. Even the mayor, who'd apparently gotten a very persuasive phone call at 4 in the morning, and at the center, standing directly in front of the door, was Sarah Mitchell. She looked exhausted. She'd been up all night coordinating this on social media, making calls and working with David's hastily assembled legal team, but she'd never felt more awake in her life. The foreman approached cautiously. Ma'am, you need to clear this area. We have a legal contract to demolish this building. Sarah held up a document. And I have a temporary restraining order halting all demolition, pending an investigation into fraud and misrepresentation by Clearview Development. The court has granted us 72 hours to present evidence. The foreman's face went through several colors. This is ridiculous. Mr. Crane won't be taking your call, David said, stepping forward. He looked professional and alert despite the early hour. Every inch the competent attorney. He disappeared last night. His office has no idea where he is. Funny thing, when we started digging into Clearview's ownership structure, we found layers of shell companies and irregularities that raised a lot of red flags. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit is very interested in talking to him. This was a slight exaggeration. The FBI had only been contacted an hour ago, but the foreman didn't need to know that. Sarah said clearly, her voice carrying to the crowd and to the news cameras that had showed up. Thank you. Twitter, you can either withdraw peacefully, or you can try to demolish a building in front of 200 witnesses and multiple news crews while violating a court order. Your choice. The foreman looked at the crowd, at the cameras, at the document in Sarah's hand. He pulled out his phone, made a call, had a terse conversation, then hung up. "We're pulling back," he said. "But this isn't over," good Sarah replied. "Neither are we." Trucks reversed away, and the crowd erupted in cheers. 3 months later, the grand reopening of Mitchell's community. Hub was everything Sarah had hoped for, and more. The building had been lovingly restored. With grants from 3 different preservation societies and the State Arts Council, the main floor now housed rotating gallery space for local artists, 60% of all sales going to the artists themselves. The back half had been converted into subsidized office space for small businesses and nonprofits, rented at rates that actually allowed struggling entrepreneurs to afford downtown. Locations. The second floor, which had been storage for decades, was now a community gathering space, free to use for meetings, workshops, and events. A commercial kitchen in the back allowed cooking classes and small-scale catering businesses to operate, but Sarah's favorite addition was the historical display in the entryway. Photos and artifacts from the store's 60-year history, with stories from community members about what Mitchell's General Store had meant to them. Her grandfather's original cash register held pride of place. Lovingly restored, he'd be proud, David said, sliding an arm around Sarah's waist as they watched the crowd mill through the building. "I hope so," Sarah replied. She could feel the warmth in the walls, the sense of contentment that suffused the space. The spirits, the essence of all those decades of meaning, seemed happy, satisfied. The building had a purpose again, a community again. Clearview development had collapsed spectacularly once investigators started pulling threads. Crane had been found 3 states away, suffering from what doctors described as a severe psychotic break. He'd been babbling about spirits and meaning in places that fight back. The media had a field day. His company's assets had been seized, the shell companies exposed, and several executives were facing criminal charges. The properties they'd targeted, including Mitchell's, had been released from sale. Sarah had learned something from Crane, though. He'd been feeding on places that had meaning, draining them. But meaning wasn't finite. It could be renewed, redirected, transformed. Mitchell's General Store couldn't exist in the modern economy. But Mitchell's Community Hub? That filled a real need, served a real purpose, and created new meaning instead of just preserving old memories. Speech! Someone called from the crowd, and others took up the chant. Sarah reluctantly climbed onto a chair, looking out at the faces, some familiar, some new, all part of the community this place was building. "Thank you all for being here," she began. 3 months ago, I almost let this building die. Not because I didn't love it, but because I didn't understand what it really was. I thought it was just bricks and wood, just a store that couldn't compete anymore. She paused, collecting her thoughts. My grandfather built this place 60 years ago, and he poured his heart into it. But what made it special wasn't the merchandise or the business model. It was the purpose to be a place where people could connect, where community could happen, where everyone was treated like they mattered. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. The purpose doesn't die just because the economy changes. It just needs new forms. And that's what we've created here, not a museum to the past, but a living, breathing space that serves today's needs while honoring yesterday's values. A place where local artists can thrive, where small businesses can grow, where community can gather and connect. She saw Margaret Howell's daughter in the crowd. Margaret had passed away years ago, but her family was still in town. The young woman was smiling through tears. My grandfather used to say that a business is only as good as the community it serves. Well, this isn't a business anymore. It's something better. It's a place. And as long as it serves this community, as long as people keep coming together here, it'll never die. The walls might change, the purpose might evolve, but the heart, that's eternal. The applause was deafening. As Sarah climbed down, she felt it, a brief, warm touch on her shoulder. There and gone in an instant. She turned, but there was nothing visible. Yet she knew. Her grandfather was here. All the spirits were here, woven into the fabric of the building, satisfied that their legacy would continue. Later that night, After the crowds had gone, and Sarah was doing a final walkthrough before locking up, she stood in the center of the main floor and simply breathed in the atmosphere. The building felt alive, not in a spooky way, but in the way a home feels alive. Warm, welcoming, full of potential. "Thank you," she whispered to the empty air, "for not giving up, for fighting, for teaching me what really matters." The lights flickered once, not ominously but gently, like a wing-can. Sarah smiled. The store had closed. But it hadn't left. It had simply become something new. 1 year later, epilogue. Sarah sat in her grandfather's old office, now her officers reviewing applications for the community space. A local youth theater group wanted to put on a production. A nonprofit needed meeting space for their weekly support group. A small business owner wanted to teach financial literacy workshops. She approved them all. Through the window, she could see the main floor bustling with activity. An art opening was happening in the gallery. The co-working space was full of people typing away on laptops. In the community kitchen, cooking class was learning to make traditional dishes from various cultures. It was everything she'd hoped for and more. Her phone buzzed with a text from David. "Dinner at 7. The twins want to show you their art projects." Sarah smiled. Life was good. The hub was thriving, her family was happy, and she'd discovered a purpose she never knew she was looking for. She started to type a reply. When she felt it, that familiar warmth, like a gentle hand on her shoulder, Sarah didn't turn around. She'd learned that the spirits didn't manifest visibly anymore. They didn't need to. Their presence was woven so thoroughly into the building now that they were simply part of it, as natural as the wood grain in the floorboards. "We're doing okay, aren't we, Grandpa?" she said softly. The warmth intensified, and Sarah could have sworn she heard a whisper. "Better than okay, sweetheart. You're doing exactly what I always hoped someone would. Making this place matter. Making it live." Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. The Mitchell's Community Hub sign glowed softly in the evening light. Visible from blocks away, a beacon for anyone seeking connection, community, or simply a place where they mattered. The store had closed. But it hadn't left. It had become eternal.